Good evening and welcome to the Housing Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday the 2nd of June at 6 o'clock. We're in the Council Chamber at the Town Hall in Royal Leamington Spa. Please be aware the meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel, and also note as part of the Council's commitment to reducing the use of paper, councillors and officers may use electronic devices during the course of the meeting. My name is Councillor Peter Phillips. I'm Chairman of the Committee. Before we go further into the meat of the agenda, I want to advise, particularly those watching on YouTube, that this is the continuation of the adjourned Housing Scrutiny Committee meeting from last Wednesday, the 27th of May. To transparently explain what has happened, the full HSC meeting was scheduled for last Wednesday. However, the District Council's Overview and Scrutiny Committee from Tuesday, the 26th of May, which was reviewing the South Warwickshire local plan before the Joint Council's Cabinet meeting on Thursday last week, they needed an additional night to complete their review. In consequence, in coordination with Councillor Milton, Chair of ONS, and Mr Leach as Monitoring Officer, we agreed to reschedule the HSC meeting to tonight from last Wednesday. However, we did hold a brief quorate HSC meeting last Wednesday to appoint the Chairman and Vice Chair so that the administrative process could continue. I was appointed as Chairman and Councillor Bode as Vice Chair for the 2026-27 municipal year. For those councillors who weren't there last Wednesday, are there any questions or queries about that? No, thank you. Having placed that on public and YouTube record, I will continue with tonight's meeting. Alongside me on my right is Darren Knight, Deputy Chief Executive, and on my left, Graham Leach, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer, and Kelly Barnard, Scrutiny Officer. In addition, we have from the housing team, Christian Melgard, Interim Head of Housing, Paul Smith, Business Development and Change Manager, Philip Dark, Interim Asset Manager, Dominic Linton, Development Team Manager. We also have joining us this evening Councillor Melrose, the portfolio holder for housing. There are no planned tests in the emergency alarm. I think we're all familiar with it. If there is an alarm, it is a real alarm. I've been asked by committee services to remind councillors that when using mics, please do not place any electronic equipment such as your laptop or phone in front of the mic, because this will affect the mic's effectiveness. And please remember not to turn away from the mic when speaking. The agenda is exactly as was published for the 27th of May meeting, so we have already handled agenda items 1 and 2, so I'll move on to the rest of the agenda now, which is apologies and substitutes. And I have apologies from Councillor Paul Whiteman and from Jen Morrison and the officers. Are there any other apologies? No, thank you. Members, to move then on to declarations of interest for tonight's agenda. Have any members anything they wish to declare? No, thank you. So we move on to item 5, the minutes of the meeting held on April the 21st. This is the public minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of April. However, before I ask members to comment on this, I have 2 changes to the published minutes. On page 2 of the minutes, at the top of the very first paragraph, delete of Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So that should read, the committee considered a report from Governance Services which informed the committee's work programme for 25-26. Secondly, Councillor Dixon has raised with me that the bullet point number 8 on page 5 of the minutes be amended. I agree with her that as this point is referring to a motion that was passed by full council, we should use exactly the same language as that in that motion. And therefore, I accordingly recommend that we change pregnant women to those who were pregnant. Any other changes, councillors? May I then have a proposer for the minutes? Councillor Knight and a seconder from Councillor Barton. Can I see all those in favour, please? Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors. We now move on to item 6, the work programme, one of our standard items. I've agreed with officers to defer the Section 106 acquisition report to the next meeting, which is the 7th of July. This will allow for the framework to be discussed at the Housing Strategy Delivery Forum before coming back to Housing Scrutiny Committee. Other than that, members, have you any comments or thoughts about the work programme? I'm getting complete silence from you tonight. So I think it is more balanced than we have seen in previous months. It's still a heavy programme and one or two things may slip. I think we have got it more balanced now. That doesn't mean to say that I think we won't have some challenges around August, September meetings. Mr. Melgar, do you have anything you want to add on the work programme?
Not as it stands, Chair. I know that we have on the agenda for this meeting some gap analysis, so happy to pick up discussion then.
Okay, thank you. Well, in that case, we have two recommendations. The committee notes its remit, as set out in Appendix 1, that is unchanged, and the committee endorses the approach to its work as set out in the report, and asks officers to bring forward a programme of work on this basis. So I will propose that. Councillor Dixon, you will second that. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you very much, councillors. So we now move on to item 7, Consumer Standards Improvement Programme. Mr. Smith, are you introducing this tonight? Thank you very much.
Yes, Chair, thank you. So the purpose of the briefing note is to provide an update on the Consumer Standards Improvement Programme. Overall, the programme remains on track. Of the 141 improvement actions identified, 88 have now been completed, representing 62% of the total programme, with a further 44 actions actively underway. A strengthened assurance framework, enhanced governance arrangement and regular performance reporting are now embedded and providing greater oversight and accountability. Encouraging progress has been made in several areas. However, the note highlights continued focus on the key areas identified by the regulator, namely health and safety compliance, stock condition information, repairs and maintenance, and complaints handling. Two further key points to highlight from the briefing note. Firstly, I'm pleased to report that the Council's internal auditors have awarded a substantial degree of assurance that the systems and controls in place in respect to the HQN action plan are appropriate and working effectively. And secondly, importantly, the project team is currently refocusing priorities and refreshing the improvement plan to increase the pace of compliance against the regulatory judgments and to reflect the recommendations coming out of the recent external and internal audit reports, HQN's midpoint review and Pennington's endpoint review. We're working with project leads to develop a refreshed improvement plan and compliance evidence log, which will be reported against in August. Clearly, compliance actions continue to be delivered whilst we undertake this review, which will also assist us in our preparations to become inspection ready. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Members, over to you for questions. Councillor Firth.
I've got two questions. The first one is just The first one is just curiosity, really. I just wondered what the Monday board was.
Yes, yeah, the Monday board is software that we use to track and program out all the actions. So we're able to set them out in this computer software, and we can analyse where we are with different actions and also be able to report on them. So it's a sort of a tracker, really, and it helps us and aids us in monitoring the programme of actions.
I imagine this whiteboard, you know, that you fill in on a Monday, but no, that's really cool. Thanks very much. And can I carry on? Okay, the other question is on item 5, table 3, we've just got the fire risk actions have gone up by 210 in March, from March 26. I think I've got that right. Do you know why that is? It sort of had a bit of a leap.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can I hand over to...
Can you hear me? Excellent. Yes, fire risk actions, and particularly those overdue, are an area of focus for us, as Paul said. Reshaping the priority plan, the improvement plan, to focus in on the findings of the original judgment. We have done an internal exercise, and we have a project group, a sort of task and finish group that we've set up to unblock some of the administrative issues that we've encountered. Essentially, we're carrying out a lot of actions, but because we put in a more robust mechanism for closing actions down in the system, appending evidence, checking with contractors, residents, it's more of a burden administratively, and we hadn't quite factored in the process and what that required. So whereas we should be closing upwards of a couple of hundred FRA actions a week, that's been down at around 50. So we've assembled a project team. We've brought in additional resources from across housing to dedicate additional hours each week. We're meeting again tomorrow to go through a plan of prioritisation for that. So we will be expecting to see those four. We're expecting that probably 400 to 600 actions that we'll be able to close down quite quickly. But again, we don't want to compromise the more robust process we put in place to make sure that we're not trying to unpick why things were closed in the future. And obviously, we're awaiting the final Pennington's endpoint review, which will be coming to the next Housing Scrutiny Committee in July, of which sort of fire risk actions and the work around that was included. So we'll be able to update and say what we're doing in terms of action around that as well.
You okay, Councillor Firth?
Yeah, so it's just like you've got a new system in place and it's flagging up. You're getting tied to on your administration, basically. I got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've seen Councillor Bowden and Councillor Harrison. So Councillor Bowden and Councillor Barton.
Thank you. Yes, on item 4, which is the improvement plan progress. I'm very suspicious when I see previous month's count being the same as current month's count. When it's got lots of things feeding into it, how come they're the same? It just strikes me as a little odd. And I have one more question after that.
I'll let Paul come in on this as well. I think there will be times when some actions take a bit longer to close, and as we are reporting quite regularly each month, there'll be periods where not much has happened in terms of closing things down. We also need to be very clear, certainly in the conversations we have internally at Consumer Standards Compliance Group and with the regulator, that we can appropriately evidence actions which are closed. And so we don't want to close anything preemptively that we then have to reopen again. Although I think we are, Paul, expecting some additional actions to be closed June, July. So by the time we report next, you'll see movement. I think just with the timings, with summer, the bank holiday and everything else, we haven't had much to complete. But obviously that will speed up as we progress.
Sorry, the other question I've got is on non-decent homes, where we seem to have fallen backwards over the last 2 months.
Yeah, we're currently doing an exercise for the year-end return on non-decency. It is something we've picked up as part of the work around stock condition surveys. We've assembled additional resources to support that work, because I know that as part of what they do with the surveys, we'll be picking up any hazards that are in those properties when we do it. And I think I'll look to Paul to give me an update on when we will finalise that year-end position, because I know the numbers change, and I think the work that we do behind the scenes with the data, sometimes with more properties coming in, more properties coming within the scope, we need to make sure that when those numbers differ, we explain in the narrative, and it's something that, as part of the pro forma that's appended in the appendix to this report, I think we need to get sharper with how we explain that and those variances, because something, it might be very benign, it might be a very simple explanation, but I think committee need to be cited so that you get assurance that we are on top of the numbers.
Any further questions, Councillor Bird? Okay, Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Going back to table 1, which was, yeah, they're looking pretty respectable, 72%. But it's, I was just wondering about the 9 that have not started, and therefore plans for reasons that haven't started, and other plans and timescales for when they will start. And I've got a follow-up question. Thanks.
Yes, so we've got 9 that have not started yet. But what we're doing at the moment is we're going through this review, and we're looking at the improvement plan, and we're reprioritising those. So we'll be able to report to you where we are with all of those actions.
Councillor Harrison.
Yep, thank you. And going down to, and I'm conscious my first Housing Scrutiny Committee, so some of these items may have been covered before, so apologies for that.
And apologies for forgetting to welcome you to your first Housing Scrutiny Committee. It is, of course, yes, your first one, yes.
Yeah. And I've lost my, yeah, I've got it. And then on table 4, there's quite an increase from, these are the outstanding, I mean, the results look really good in terms of repair requests completed within target time, you know, the high 90s, which is good. But I just noticed there's quite a worrying increasing trend there from Jan, Feb, March, 1,200 plus. This is the outstanding repair requests that are overdue, and there's quite an increase from, you know, in the first 3 months of the year, Jan, Feb, March, 1,200, then 1,400, then 1,700. Therefore, did that attract any, you know, concern or any alarm bells with that increasing trend? Thanks, and whether that's continuing. Thanks.
Yeah, we are conscious of the number of repairs that we have active or works in progress, the WIP as it's called, which include repairs which are on time as well as overdue, and those which are overdue reporting. I think where we have made significant improvements working with our contractors who upgraded their system over the last few months. So where we did start, just for context, back in April, where there were approaching triple digits overdue emergency repairs, that was now single digits. So we've done a lot of work around checking through and validating that information, working with our contractors to make sure that we can rely on that. We're now in the process of reviewing on a daily basis with Phil and the team, with the contractor, because we need to get a sense of how many of those are genuinely over, certainly the routine, or active, versus how many have been closed down, because I think our views are sort of different. They are of the view that actually a lot of these shouldn't be active, they are closed. Picking up some challenges with subcontractors, we're trying to validate the work that's been done. How do we make sure that's happened? So there's a bit of an administrative exercise on the contractor's part. We're checking and validating that from a reporting side to make sure that actually what we see is what we report, and we need you to be able to sort of check and validate against that. I think we are, you know, regardless, we have a new repairs contract that we'll be looking to award in the coming weeks. We have a current contract, an interim contract with Axis, which runs through until later in the year, so November, December. Obviously, as part of that, we want to make sure that we are preparing appropriately so that we are not leaving, whether Axis are successful or not, for the new, it will be a new contract. We want to make sure that we're managing all of the flow of repairs coming through. We're not leaving a large inventory of work either to pass on or to be got on top of. So we are mobilising internally some additional project resource as a mobilisation work stream to look across and have that sort of management of the day-to-day and the data, as well as the commercial aspects, because we don't want to get a big bill from a lot of work that's been done very late in the day. So we are aware of it. We've picked it up, and Phil's picked it up with the contractors. We're picking up with our consultants as well. And we are, I think, advert is going out today for a new repairs manager. So we identified as part of the resource requirements a dedicated repairs manager to manage the contracts that we have for day-to-day repairs and voids. So that role will again help us to make sure that we are managing effectively once we get into a better position with the data and the numbers and the performance. So hopefully that gives a bit of a context of where we are and what we're doing.
Sorry, just to understand the beginning of what you were saying. So a lot of it mainly is due to a new system, did you say, whereby you're having to transfer data across? Did you say that, whether the name of that system is? Thanks.
We know that the system is a challenge. We know that the data that contractors are seeing, things are taking longer to close down. So either because they're waiting for an invoice from a subcontractor, they're waiting for confirmation. But with the work that's been done, we want to push them to make sure that we've got the most up-to-date position, because we need to be able to rely on what we're reporting. And at the moment, we see the numbers increasing. So overall, the trend is that way. We need to reverse that trend. That's why we're working with them. So I think there will be an element of the data and how things are coming through and closing. But I also want to make sure through our sort of contract management that doesn't result in tenants waiting longer for their repairs or repairs being missed. And that's on us to make sure that we get that assurance from the contractor.
Okay. Councillor Barson, I saw you, then Councillor Knight.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you again for this. I think generally we're going the right way, but I did write some words down. Mobilising work stream, managing performance data. All sounds very good, but we don't want, when the repairs contract's renewed, we don't want to dip in compliance. So you know what we'll be saying. We'll be holding you to account. But anyway, it was about just... If I was about report writing, only a small little thing, if I was new to this and I came along and I read this and zipped through it, I think, 3, summary of regulatory judgment findings, cannot evidence, overdue, no assurance, stock condition, new surveys. That sounds like we're in trouble. But I presume that's from 2024. So can we put where 3 dots, summary of regulatory judgment findings in 2024. Else, it sounds like it's now, which we don't want. And that's all basically. Put a date in there, because people will just scroll through this like I did, and that's all.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, Chair, I think it's a good point, and we can just elaborate and just make it clear, that was the original judgment, and clearly we've moved on since then. Thank you.
Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, why can't we meet our legal requirement for the health and safety? It said on there that we cannot evidence that we meet all legal health and safety requirement.
Where are you, Councillor Knight? Can you just...
Do you know the answer?
Mr. Margard or Mr. Dark.
I think this was the point that Councillor Bartle was making about the narrative in section 2 and 3. 3.1 is WC cannot evidence it meets all legal health and safety requirements. I think we just need to make sure that we are emphasising that was the finding of the original judgment of the regulator back in 2024, not necessarily where we are now. So I think we just need to sharpen that up so it's not confusing.
Yeah, that's answered the question.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Councillor Dixon?
Yeah, it's just thinking about the complaints, and I know that we've had for a while concerns, especially about the level 2 complaints now, which are going up. I just wonder if you could explain to me the process. From personal experience, as a councillor, the complaints that I'm getting, especially when they're escalated to level 2, tend to be that actually the level 1 complaint wasn't finished. And I just wonder whether there is any sort of closed loop in the process that you know, the residents can confirm that the repair is done when they have a complaint requiring it. Looks like Councillor Melrose is all ready to go. Let's go for it.
Because I literally have 5 inboxes full of complaints emails. So when a complaint comes in stage 1, it's in housing. There's a housing dedicated team who will do the complaint. If the person is...
Melrose, could you move your
All right, I'll move that,
microphone a
sorry.
little bit closer, sorry.
Is that better? So stage 1 complaints goes to the housing complaints team. They should review the complaint, get evidence when required, and come with a judgment. If the person who's put the complaint is not happy, then it goes to stage 2, which goes to Graham Leach's corporate team, who then do their part of the investigation, which I'm sure Graham Leach has told us all he's got more staff in that complaint 2 team. They will then do that review of the case and come with a judgment. If the person's still not happy, they can go to the Housing Ombudsman, I can never pronounce that, I'm sorry, or the local government one. However, when it comes to stage 2, they're looking at how the stage 1s are being done and what training around the quality, because of the complaints I've been seeing as I'm going through the system with the residents, is about how the communication, but also the quality of the response back. Because I think sometimes that's what not riles the resident more, but probably frustrates the resident more, is the response back. So yes, so that's the process. I'll look to Graham if he wants to add anything.
I think Mr. Leach does want to add something.
Apologies, I'll add a bit from a corporate side because it talks more about what's going on in the background as well. And I think there's a lot of cross work which has now started between the policy performance complaints team and the team within housing as well. So they actually now have a weekly meeting in terms of looking at themes within complaints and actually learning from those. I would agree in terms of the themes, and that was actually a discussion we had last week. Paul Smith was in the same meeting with me as well. Actually, in terms of seeing stage 1 actions not completed and people then wanting to go to stage 2, and that was a bit where there's been a bit of work across the 2 service areas in terms of picking this up with contractors, because I will say it's not just one contractor, and I'm sure you're seeing that as well, and the contract management work around that and how that's brought together to make sure the actions are taking place. So I will say that one of our contractors is now putting a whole new raft of people in place as well to support that, which I think is interesting and really positive progress forward. So the work is happening, it just takes time to begin to turn the proverbial oil tanker around, so to speak, in terms of begin to get that process. And there is regular engagement between the central team and actually sort of the housing team and other stage 1 complaints teams as well, in terms of learning from those reports and looking for themes as well. So that work is now there. Now the resources are in that central team as well. So, yeah.
Any follow-up, Councillor Dixon?
No, thank you very much for that. But I agree, it's the communications. It's always about the communications, and it's just maintaining those and the quality of the communications.
Okay, any other comments or questions, members? I have a couple of points that when Mr. Melgard and I reviewed this just on table 2 on the RAG, on track doesn't really tell us whether it's good, bad or indifferent. So I think we're going to change the table to be a little bit more informative in terms of what on track actually means. And on table 4, and for that matter, I think table 3, We don't have any target column, and I've asked for a target column to be added in to that, so we know where we are performing against targets, good or bad. So at least we've got a benchmark to measure against. In that case, members, this report is only to note, if we are okay. Let's note the report and move on to agenda item 8, which is the tenant satisfaction measures update. I believe it's you again, Mr. Smith, who's going to pick up on this.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, thank you. Members, this briefing note provides an overview of the Council's approach to collecting, analysing and reporting on the tenant satisfaction measure outcomes. And these are the ones that are attained from the regulatory perception survey that we administer. It's commonly referred to as TSMs, but these are a statutory requirement introduced by the regulator of social housing. The note highlights that there are two types of TSMs, those that are derived from management information measures based on operational data, such as repairs, complaints, safety, compliance, antisocial behaviour, and then the tenant perception measures based on direct tenant feedback gathered through surveys. The purpose of the note is not to present the annual TSM results themselves, but to provide assurance to members on the methodology, governance and reporting arrangements that sit behind these perception survey processes. Now, the perception survey TSMs form an important part of the consumer regulations framework, and they're intended to provide a consistent picture of tenant satisfaction across the sector by using prescribed questions, and there's 12 in total, that are governed by specific technical requirements. The briefing note explains the approach taken during 25-26, which included methods used to engage tenants through email, texting, postal surveys, and it also highlights how additional local questions and tenant comments are being used to strengthen the customer insight, improve tenant records and support wider service improvement activity. And again, the briefing notice for information, Chair. Thank you.
Members. Councillor Barton.
Yeah, hi, I'm trying to think of words now. How many do we get back? And do we get enough back to come to a, whatever it is, I'm trying to think of the right conclusion. If you send out 20 and get one back, it's not an overall picture. So if we send out 6,000 or so, how many is a good figure to get back? And do we sort of get that number back to make a meaningful, that's the word, a meaningful conclusion or whatever?
Yes, Chair. Yeah, the regulator sets the minimum sample size using a prescribed sort of formula based on the number of eligible tenants and the required confidence level of a provider of our size. So for 25-26, our minimum required sample was 535 responses, which is about 10.11% of eligible tenants. We actually received 1,065 responses, which is just over 21% of eligible tenants. So almost exactly double the minimum required sample, which meant that we did have a good sample to take the feedback from.
I could say, is that because we've got really bad tenants? I think are they generally good? Do we know if they're generally good or are they awful? Because we've got a lot back. People only normally complain as opposed to praise.
Chair, I think there was a mixture really, not just all previous complainees or complainants. There were people that genuinely wanted to feedback, and a lot clearly were positive feedback, and certainly that's the trend that we're seeing from the 24-25 surveys through to 25-26. There is clear uplift in the satisfaction levels. I mean, there's still some low areas around sort of complaints and antisocial behaviour, and I think, Chair, we had that discussion a few meetings ago about, you know, people are, how satisfied are they when they've made a complaint or they're experiencing antisocial behaviour. But certainly we still want to work towards improving those satisfaction levels and the way we handle those cases. Thank you.
And when does this report come out? When does it come out?
We are in the process of validating all the survey results. The regulator requires a submission to them by the 30th of June. So, subject to further discussion with the Chair, we'll be able to report something back July, maybe August.
I was just, in fact, Mr Smith, looking at the work agenda, and we've got the annual complaints report scheduled for next month. So if this has got to go to the regulator by the 30th of June, I'm looking at Mr Knight and Mr Melgard here in terms of whether we could actually also encompass that in the same section as the annual complaints report. Because I must imagine there's quite a large overlap between the two.
Yeah, I think from the committee's perspective, I think what we need to be able to show is what we're doing with the data. So I think we go through quite a robust process of validation. The scores will be the scores that are from the feedback. We need to submit that, but we also need time to be able to put that in front of you and say, this is what we're learning from it, which is, again, back to the gap analysis we'll come on to a bit later. You know, committee should be seeing the methodology we use, which this report provides and allows you to sort of interrogate that. But then the next step, so what? What are you learning from the information? What are you now going to do with it? Which feeds into our subsequent work planning, improvement plan. So whether that's an appendix to the improvement plan that we provide or something separate to one of the resident engagement updates.
I think it's probably better separate, but at the same time, so we're talking about the same issue at the same meeting. As the two will be, as I say, there will be a significant overlap, I imagine.
Yeah, I think we can provide that.
With your agreement, members, can we add that to the work plan for next month? Yeah, I'm getting heads, so I'm not going to take a vote there, but yes, okay, we'll add that in. Thank you. Where were we? Councillor Barton, we were with you, weren't we? You're done. Councillor Bird.
Thank you. I'd actually like to congratulate the team on getting the kind of response they're getting, because it's never been easy to get tenants' views. If they've got a problem, you get them. If they don't, you don't. So it would be interesting. So congratulations to the team first, again, how many they've got, and we all want more. On 4.4, where the officer level meeting group will meet to review the schemes on a regular basis, the surveys on a regular basis, it would be interesting for us to get some feedback on that, because taking what Councillor Barton's saying, and what my views tended to be that if you've got a complaint or a problem, you fill things in. If you haven't, you don't. I'd like to see what evidence we've got of either. Because you might have people who are happy and just want to fill a form in.
Yes, yeah, I mean, we can incorporate that into the report, but what we have now, which Dominic will chair, is a resident satisfaction officer group, a governance group, and they're now going to get all the surveys, because we're now doing them monthly, so we can respond quicker, we're a lot more agile to any issues and trends, and also we can measure the satisfaction levels, whether it is complaints or whether it is genuine sort of wanting to change the service, you know, and we can gauge that. And so that group will meet, and we can update the outcome of that group through the normal Consumer Standards Improvement Plan report, you know, ongoing, if that's what you would require, yeah.
Councillor Bird? No, you've nothing to ask. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. Just further on that point about the point that Councillor Barton mentioned there about the bias, which obviously does exist. But I'm thinking in terms of when people respond to questionnaires, it's making sure that you get the positives as well as the negatives. And it must be, in that case, as part of that is how you pitch the questions and how you're looking for that information. But a lot of these are sort of set by government anyway. A lot of them are standard points. So I guess any bias will be across all councils. And therefore, when we get a percentage response, how good or bad that is, I guess it'll be, that bias will exist across all, and therefore there won't be differential, you know, particularly for Warwick District anyway, because that, I mean, I'm mindful of that, that we can't draw too many conclusions from that positive and negative response you get. But yeah, it's a difficult one to get that high response, getting the good elements as well as the problems coming back, if you like, you know. Thanks.
Yes, Chair, thank you.
When you get responses back, do you acknowledge those responses? Do you reply to those responses? What happens to them, or do you just process them? Is there a communication back to the tenants to say, thank you, you've raised issue A, B, and C, and this is what's happening, or what happens? Linton.
Thank you. That's something that we're looking to introduce from the 26-27 process. So Paul has mentioned that we're introducing the officer level group to review comments that come in. So alongside the 12 standard questions, we also have an opportunity for the tenants to make comments alongside those. So if they say that they are dissatisfied with a particular element, they can comment on why that is. So those comments are going to feed into the officer level group. Alongside that, we're also looking to run an automation that runs from the second quarter, so from July the 1st, that takes those responses into a piece of software and looks to analyse the sort of sentiment that comes from them, and then we can look to either direct them to the relevant sort of team leaders that it applies to, and then there'll also be provision within my team to sort of check any of them and raise any immediate concerns that way. So last year not so much, but this year coming, that's something we're introducing.
Will you feed back to the tenants of your about any findings or any steps taken?
That's perhaps something that we can discuss in the sort of kick-off meeting for the group. There's certainly capability to do it through the system, so that's something that we can consider at the group. And
I think otherwise tenants will feel that they're going to be throwing it into a black box. Thank you, Councillor. You and I are doing a good job here today. Into black box and nothing comes back. And Mr. Melvin, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I know when we come back with the full set of data from the past year, we'll be able to do some benchmarking against our peers. You know, what good looks like at other organisations, and how do we compare? I think we are also talking internally as part of, we produce a annual tenant report. We're also looking at the use of the website and something potentially bespoke around TSMs. Other organisations, you know, good practice, being able to set out TSM results, what you've learned, what they're doing with it, and how we can use that on our website, and also to share that with tenants and shared owners who are also part of the regulatory requirements. So we're looking at how we can share the results, but also what we're doing with the results more clearly, more accessibly with tenants.
Councillor Barton, you wanted to follow up on something?
Yeah, you just raised a point there, and it's something I just presumed happened. And since then I thought, I presume they can do it in paper as well as email. Yeah. Do you get an email back saying, thank you for your valued response, this goes towards us producing this, that and the other, and we really do value your time in filling this form out? Or don't they get a reply at all?
they don't get a reply at the moment.
See, I think that's bad. I think even that bad, an acknowledgement email, not doing an acknowledgement email is bad. Because when I fire an email off, if I don't get a reply saying thank you for, you know, I think that's...
rather than continue around this debate, members, are you willing to make a recommendation out of the scrutiny to the portfolio holder and to the housing team to request that they look into and set up a system to feed back to tenants on the TSM? Are we permitted to do that, Mr. Leach? Is that possible? Okay. Members, can I just see a show of hands to agree that? Right. Thank you. That was unanimous. It's unusual, but we don't very often do direct recommendation of this, but I think this is an important one. It's really good that you've got 20% feedback, 20% plus feedback. That is, I think, outstanding. But I think let's keep the momentum going by really realising, by ensuring that tenants realise that their feedback is valued. Do I see any other comments on this? Well, other than that recommendation we just voted on, that was purely to note. And in that case, with no further comments, I'm going to move on to item 9, which is an update on how we're doing with Awab's law. And I think it's Mr. Dark, I'm told.
Hello. Yes, again, I'll take the report as read to emphasise a few points that we're in phase 1 of the implementation of AWAB's law, and AWAB's law is not just about damp as initially set out, it's about other risks as well. So we're in phase 1, which is about anything to do with damp and mould, but also emergency hazards, so things such as loss of heating, severe leaks, electrical, no electrics in property. And then later this year, we'll be moving into 4 of the other areas of the hazards set out in the Housing Health and Safety Rating System. And then later next year, it will be all of the hazards in the Housing Health and Safety Rating System that will come into coverage. A couple of other things to highlight. As I said, we are in a situation now where, any damp and mould has to be treated and dealt with as an AWAB's law case initially. But just to really emphasise that not all damp and mould will stay within the scope of AWAB's law. If it's very, very minor, if it's not presenting a hazard or a risk to the household, then that can then go out of scope. We still manage it as a damp and mould case, we'll still close it down, we'll still track the works to make sure that works get completed, but our focus has to be on the significant hazards, the emergency hazards, which could actually cause harm to the residents. Really to emphasise that. And then also, because it's around the hazards, it's also a person-centred approach now to AWAB's law. It's all about looking at the residents. So when we're triaging the cases that are coming in, we are finding out about the health issues with the residents, the risk of the residents, young family, older people, if they've got medical conditions. So that's all part of this process now. And then that can determine, the hazards that are in place. So I just thought I'd emphasise that. And obviously, with that in mind, when we go on to, how we're performing in the numbers of damp and mould cases, the report setting out we've got 282 damp and mould cases, but only around 28% of those are significant hazards. So, they're the ones that we're focusing on. They're the ones that we're prioritising in terms of compliance with the actual law, the KPIs, etc. And I think, the report sets out that the key things that we're doing. One of the most important things is to investigate the issue, survey the property, investigate the damp, find out about the residents' needs. And the report sets out that we're doing, got strong performance on carrying out the investigations, and strong performance on issuing the works that are required as well. So we did have a challenge with the writing to the tenants. We were very ambitious. We were conscious there was a 3-day deadline. So we were very ambitious trying to have an automated process so that,
you wouldn't have to have somebody sat there writing reports. They'd go and do a survey, it would all automatically run through a system and then produce reports. We had some teething troubles with that. But I was talking to you, Don, wasn't I, earlier today, and in May we're up to 100% of the reports now going out on time. So we've overcome that challenge. And obviously then, there's the sheet that shows the performance. So, I'll take any questions.
Councillor Barton.
Thanks for that. I mean, I think is this the first time we've seen one of these? Or have I missed them before? I think, trying to understand it, percentage of customers issued with you've answered some of this, with a damp mould investigation report in 3 working days, which is ambitious. Turning the report around in 3 working days is ambitious. Did you say we got 50? December was atrocious, only 6%. Does that relate? That relates to the number of cases opened, I presume. That line that says number of cases opened in that month. Does that mean 50.9% reports were issued on 72 of the properties? Am I reading that right? Number of cases opened. Number of cases opened in November last year was 72. So does that mean half of those we managed to issue the report in 36 hours, in 3 days? Am I right in that, saying that?
Almost. The number of DMC cases opened is when we learn about it, it's when it's reported. So that's our day 0 baseline for the DMC case. The row for the percentage of customers issued a DMC investigation report in 3 days. The month there represents the month in which that investigation report was due. So if somebody did report an instance on the 30th of November, for example, they might not be investigated until, say, the 1st or 2nd of December, and then they would fall into the December column for the DMC investigation report, because that's when the report was due. So the column headings aren't fixed in that these are the people who reported their case initially in that month. It is when that particular transactional activity was due. So they may have made the initial report in November, weren't inspected till early December, so the report is due in December. The work raised, say, mid-December, then the target completion date for the work may be January. So that one case will feature in each of November, December and January for at least 3 different measures.
I'm thinking then this table don't work. Because if you're producing figures for November, they're not really November, because November could be December and go into January. So I'm never a great fan of. I'd rather see cases open 72 and cases closed 72. I'm not particularly.
It's the divisor you're getting at.
Sorry?
It's the divisor in any one month is 6% of 72 or 6% of 40.
Yeah,
I see what you're getting at.
I don't know whether it's I don't know whether it's the right table. I don't know what everybody else thinks. I don't know.
Mr. Melville.
Yeah, I think there will be overlap. I think we're also mindful of how we benchmark our figures. So we're adopting the housemark measures so that we can consistently compare. I think we can look to provide a bit of separate narrative around month performance in totality. I think we are going to look at trends, because I think looking at a snapshot of 1 month, if we're up at 90+%, we'd want to be presenting to committee, right, how are we performing? Has there been a dip? Why is it? And explaining that, rather than get into the minutiae of an overlap of a reporting day. I think we are starting to get the information now. We'll be adding this to the pro forma table we produce regularly. I think it is looked at weekly, daily by the relevant teams and the surveyors going out. I think the performance isn't where we want it to be on those measures. At the same time, we're looking at more resources that we're bringing in through the assets team in terms of capacity within performance, surveying capacity, inspection capacity, and also working with contractors, because we are mindful we're in summer months now, but we'll be starting a new repairs contract in November, December, we need to make sure we've got a sufficient contractor capacity supply chain when those cases increase. So I think we're now capturing the data. We didn't have it before. We've got it. It's not where where we need it to be on some of those measures. I'm looking at the overall, getting that to where it's the discussion about if it's a day or two over becomes irrelevant because it's showing at a high level. But I think we'll take away how we can make that a bit smarter about how we explain that.
If I may, thanks, Christian. Because the way I read it, if the 72, that means 36 of them weren't done in 3 days. Ooh, 36 were. So what happened to them 36? I mean, those 36, how many houses reported condensation in November and still have them in April? I don't know what.
I think this is exactly the same amount of detail we need, like we've gone through repairs, that what was the longest wait for someone? Did anyone wait more than, was it everyone got on the 4th day rather than day 3? I think we need to provide that level of information to give you assurance that we didn't meet 50% and then everyone else is still waiting. I think we need to make sure that's reflected in the narrative we give each report.
That's what I was thinking. We need some methodology explanation on the bottom of this report, so anybody reading this code at least starts to understand some of the numbers. But I think, Councillor Barton, you're onto a point there, although I understand the point about Housemarque. Let's move on to Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's what the area of the report I'm quite interested in is this expansion for 2026 and then 2027. So at the moment, AWAB's law is just for the severe DMC cases, and it was at 26% or something. And therefore I'm interested in, but at the moment, have you got 2 different systems of reporting and holding this data on the actual types of repairs that need doing? And I'm thinking about the data migration issue, I guess, because at the moment you've got the AWAB's law cases, and then you're going to have more coming across within the AWAB's law. But from a practical, operational point, how at some point, I guess, all the existing repairs and reports are going to have to be moved across as well. And that must be quite a workload, because I guess at the moment you have 2 systems in parallel, one covering the urgent DMCs and the other system covering electrical and fire risk and all the safety issues. And does that mean there's going to be a massive exercise in bringing all those reports and cases across, bearing in mind they're live cases as well that are being worked on and being updated, and at some point there's going to be a migration across? Or is it all on one all singing, all dancing system, and you just have to put them into a different category? Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, really good question. It is one system. There certainly isn't 2 systems anyway. I think the way to think about it is when we have a DMC instance, we call it that, it creates a case in the housing management software, and that case is effectively a container for everything that happens with that DMC instance. And a crucial part of that is repairs works orders. So it's utilising the same repair system that is used across housing, but they are effectively assigned to that particular case. So that's a container for DMC. So we don't have to record, raise, complete repairs in a separate way. They just all get done in the same way, but they are appended to that case. So then when we report, we're looking for our existing reporting mechanisms, but only in context of repairs that are linked to DMC cases. And then that case container will also include things like the triage form, any communications, phone calls, emails, text messages. The customer investigation report will go in there. So yeah, it really is like a sort of bucket for everything that relates to that DMC instance that utilises pre-existing tools in the software. And that's how phase 2 is intending to work as well.
So just to clarify, in other words, it's all held within the same container system. It's just a question of ticking, which can be done quite quickly, quite efficiently, and they will all get moved into the new higher risk, higher category. Yeah, thank you.
Members. Councillor Bird.
Thank you. I mean, we've been operating under the rules, presumed since October 2025. Relatively new. I'm looking at 2.2. People want to have a look. And I'm quite pleased that we've now moved into the area where it's not turn the heat up and open the window. We've got away from that at last. But the interesting thing is on timing. Now, if we've got an emergency, it's 24 hours. But presumably someone has to attend to determine whether it's an emergency or not, or even if it's AWAB's law. So for those that have got significant damp and mould, they've got 10 working days, but somebody's going to have to go and have a look. So are they all having a look on day one? Because you don't know. So you're aiming for the worst. And then you can back off. And then on the significant damp and mould hazards within 10 working days, then there's 3 days for the investigation concluding with the report to the tenant. And then there's 5 days to do the work. So is that a total of 13 days or 18 days for that particular one?
Effectively, it's 18 days. So emergencies, at the moment we're using the contractors the contractors will attend to deal with the emergencies, make safe and then feed back information. If there's an emergency situation which has got damp and mould, then we will then send the surveyor out. They'll do the follow-up inspection. And then that follow-up inspection is done. If that identifies any further safety works, then those further safety works will be issued on an urgent order for completion within 5 days, and that's from the conclusion of the investigation if it's safety works. And then, as I said, we've got that 3-day feedback period. But then, if it's not urgent safety works, if it's routine damp and mould works, then we then got up to 12 weeks to start that work, to actually start that work. We were talking about the systems and what's on our systems at the moment. One thing that we'll be looking to do with the new repairs contract is having seamless integration with the contractor systems, so we'll have much better visibility about has the contractor started that work within that 12-week period. Those are the timings. They start with. A lot of it is from the conclusion of your investigation. So all the works, how quickly you carry out your works, runs from the conclusion of the investigation.
So on the emergency, well, let's start with the process. We get a complaint. How do you know what kind of complaint that is? Is it black mould up the wall across the ceiling, or is it just in the corner of a room? Somebody has to go, presumably, and have a look. And the only way you can comply with this, because it could be an emergency, is to go out as soon as you've been contacted.
When the initial inquiry comes in, it comes into the contact centre, they carry out a triage. We've got a form that gets completed, so they will carry out the triage and make an assessment of the situation. If they consider it's an emergency situation, the tenant says, I've got a very severe leak and water's pouring everywhere, or there's very severe mold growth, then that will be put out as an emergency for a contractor to attend and to fix that initial problem. And in a lot of cases, that could be a mold wash. It could be a mold wash to actually go and wash the mold down because you've got an issue with, a report of serious mold. Or it could be go out and fix the leak to sort of stop there being any damage to the property and the damp spreading. So that triage that's done at that first stage will make that assessment. The contact centre operatives will make that assessment. If it requires an emergency works order, that will then go out. but that same contact centre officer will book the pre-inspection. So they will book a pre-inspection for the surveyor to go out to the property and then to have a look at the property. And so generally that's done sort of 3 to 5 days, within 3 to 5 days, that pre-inspection. And then the surveyor will then go and look at the property. They will then complete a report. They will then come back if they need to make any further inquiries, look at the property history, or talk to specialist contractors about getting specialist contractors involved, then they will do that. You don't have to get all your specialist contractor surveys done within that 10 days. You just have to get the initial investigation by your competent surveyor done within the 10 days to identify what is required. So they will then set out what is required, and then that information will go out to the resident within 3 days of the investigation concluding. The resident will get that. They will get that letter confirming what's happening. So it may say we've issued a works order, and this will be a 20-day priority works order. It may say that we're going to send a damp and mould specialist to come and look at the damp and mould, to look at the damp course. It may say we're sending out the roofer because we've seen a roofing problem. So, that report is what then gives that information to the resident, and then, as I said, any safety works will be done completed within 5 days for the safety works, but then all the other works will start within the 12-week period, and then in terms of the timescale for the work, then that will be issued on a priority that fits what work you have to carry out. So it could be issued on a routine 20-day, it could be issued on a 60-day planned job if it's more extensive works. But obviously that information will be communicated to the resident, that the order will give that time period, and then the work will be completed then to that time period.
So to complete the work, for instance, you've got your damp and mould hazards. So somebody goes out and has a look, where you're triaging first, so that's no one's seen anything, and they're making a judgment on whether it's emergency or not, which could be potentially risky if we get it wrong. Who knows? If we get it wrong more than once, I think that could be a problem. But on the other ones, where you've got 10 days to have a look at what it's going to be, 3 days to do a report, then the relevant safety works, you've got 5 days. So presume that could be a chemical wash, which would buy you time to get the other work done.
It could be a chemical wash, or they may have done a chemical wash, and if you've got severe cases, you may have to do a second one. But it could be that there is a leak and you want to fix the leak, so you want to get a leak sorted out within the 5 days. But then the remedial work of dealing with any replastering that's required, doing any redecoration works. So those are the type of works that will follow. So the main thing is to focus on doing all the works to mitigate the hazard that need to be done to mitigate that hazard, in that initial period. So as I said, those are the kind of things that you want to do. And also the guidance is very clear as well, that because it's a person-centred approach, then you may actually decide to do something within 5 days because there's a higher risk, because you've got a child maybe with a respiratory condition, or you've got adult with autoimmune conditions. So it's not sometimes that you may do something within the 5 day period that you wouldn't necessarily do for a healthy house, residents in the household, that's healthy.
Okay, but I assume that if you wanted 2 chemical washes because it was so bad, why is it an emergency?
I think we're getting into a little bit of over-specification of the problem. I understand where you're going from, Councillor Bode, but...
Well, I think we just need to review what's going on. I mean, I'm sure everything's all right. I'm still not convinced how you know which is either without seeing it, but we'll see how we get on. And hope we don't get too many complaints.
I think what we need here then is some way of feedback of when we said it's an emergency and it isn't, and when we said it isn't an emergency and it is, if you follow what I'm saying. And I don't know whether you're tracking that or not.
But we are, because what happens is any assessment made by the made by the contact centre is a provisional assessment, and then that assessment is then confirmed when the surveyor goes to site. So it may sound like a significant hazard to contact centre operative, but the surveyor may go out to site and say it's not a significant hazard. Surveyor will go out, yeah. So the surveyor, we always send the surveyors out on the damp and mold cases, so they're all pre-inspected. Surveyor will go out and then they will say, it's not a significant hazard, it's therefore out of scope. Or they may be going out to what appears to be an out of scope, and they may say, yeah, they agree that it's an out of scope. I'm not sure if we've had any cases, but it's possible a surveyor could go out and it could be a little bit worse maybe. Have we had any that were triaged out of scope and turned into significant hazards?
Out of scope to significant, yes.
We've had some of those.
I don't think so.
No, okay. So yeah.
Could we add on to the reporting something along the lines of what the question I just asked, and based on what Councillor Bode has been asking in terms of those that are, that aren't, and and those that are emergencies but aren't, and those that are deemed not to be emergencies but are. I think it would be useful just to keep a track of that, so we know what's happening as well as you. So if that could be added into the reporting, please. Yeah. Anything else, Councillor Bode, on that? Councillor Belson, you did indicate a few minutes ago.
During that conversation, I did think, we do try, when you prioritise bigger jobs, etc., do we try to prioritise a small damp mark to stop it going into, when somebody rings up and says, I've got a bit of damp, does that send the alarm bells ringing and in the old call centre?
Yeah, I mean, they're trained in their experience in assessing exactly what's happening, and asking questions to try and establish exactly what the situation is. So they're trained, and they're also very conscious that residents who are AWAB's law aware are obviously going to be doing that. So, they will be making those assessments, and I'm sure they'll err on the side of caution. And like I said, we send a surveyor out to inspect every single damp and mold case. Some organisations may not necessarily do that, but if you actually look at the guidance, something that puzzled me, but the guidance says you don't necessarily have to do an inspection. You could make a desktop assessment, and you could actually, if you read the guidance, this is what the guidance says. And again, the guidance then says that if you send a report at the end of that desktop investigation to the resident, and the resident isn't convinced, the resident can say, no, I want an inspection. And then they can ask for that inspection, but we're not in that position, because even prior to AWAB's law, we were doing a pre-inspection on all our cases anyway, so we just followed that through. So as I said, but that was obviously a decision that was made by the government, to say that, if organisations are doing that, then they've got an additional, if they've got an additional problem then, because they've then got to track all of those requests, and then they've got to start that process at that point. But anyway.
Okay, so I've got a couple of follow-up issues here. I can understand where an emergency comes where they've got a burst water pipe and that's causing all sorts of problems, etc. But how is it that we get to the stage where a tenant has an emergency problem because they've got damp and mould all over the place, and that hasn't been reported, and they haven't felt able to report it up until now? What are we doing about effectively ensuring that tenants feel comfortable reporting damp and mould at a much earlier stage than perhaps there have been? I'm building on Councillor Barton's comment, effectively stitch in time saves 9 for damp and mould. Why are we not getting to these earlier, I think is the question, and what can we do to ensure that tenants do feel able to pick up the phone or fill in the web form?
I mean, we have done various communications, put various information out there. I guess we can review that and look at doing more of that. In terms of putting information in newsletters. I guess we may have situations where a tenant talks to another tenant or talks to someone else or sees a news article and they haven't felt that that they could report it. We may have potentially apathy from some residents. So I think we can look at improving our communications, and I think we can do a lot of with the new repairs contract. I think that gives us an opportunity, because I think we'll have the contractors that are coming on board who will be very, very keen to actually be involved with pushing out the message on AWAB's or damp and mould, and they'll have an increased role in that under the new repairs contract. So that gives us another avenue.
Melgard?
Yeah, I was just going to add, with us having an in-house stock condition surveying function, we will be visiting every year a percentage of our stock. We'll be visiting 20% of our stock. A key part of that will be picking up hazards. We know that, particularly with DMC cases, it can be seasonal, depending on certainly more overcrowded houses, where there are challenges around space, where there are challenges around ventilation. I think for us is twofold: how we can use, again, that more proactive approach, use some of the intelligence to predict where damp and mould is likely to emerge, and how we can communicate with particular groups that we know might be more susceptible, whether it be location, property type, levels of overcrowding, for example. I think that's for us to use that information. All other organisations are doing that, trying to predict where DMC might arise. I think looking ahead as well, I think we need to be, again, giving assurance to the committee that in advance of the expansion of AWAB's law, we have more of an idea of the volume of cases that we might see from like electrical, fire, and then maybe start looking at heat and cold as well, because I think we need to make sure that we've got the right systems, processes and resources internally and with the contractors to respond to that. So I think there's more to do. We've started out with getting a sense of where we are, how we're performing, where we're not performing as we need to. How do we get to a stage where we're reporting consistently, close to 100%, looking at how we can be more proactive in terms of guidance, support, picking things up before they become an emergency hazard, certainly around DMC, and then looking ahead at where we're likely to see occasions, incidents of the expanded AWAB's law criteria. So there's very much a first step. I know it's been October, we're now around June, but we do have lots more that we're doing, certainly with the work, the intelligence, the analysis, the reporting, and the resource planning to carry on and to make sure that we can get on top of it.
I guess gives a follow-up then onto the fact that we have something like only a quarter of our tenants EDI profiled, which is of course a voluntary thing. But how do we identify vulnerable residents through other means within the council who would be at more risk if they had a damp and mould problem?
I think that's a key part of the work we're doing with tenancy audits. I think we need to have a better understanding, particularly where tenants and household members might have vulnerabilities, or might be asthmatic or any other autoimmune conditions which we need to know about. So again, we're looking at the new repairs contract, looking at how we might be able to prioritise for certain vulnerabilities, household members. Could there be a way of making sure that they're looked at as a priority? You've got emergencies, but again, how do we make sure that we're doing that, gathering information and able to use that ourselves when we're raising repairs, and also through our contractors? So there is more to do, and I think we need a bit more work around, like we've done with asset data, is bringing through. We have some of the EDI profiles, but what is that intelligence around our tenants and residents able to help us with this and help plan and help target and communicate with them? So I think that's certainly on the plan for this year, working with landlord services, landlord operations, to show that so what. And we do have various work streams around service equity, additional needs, that we need to be able to evidence what we are doing, how we are adapting and tailoring our services with different needs, and also with who might have vulnerabilities, like I've said. So that is on our work plan for this year, and we will be bringing more information through to analysis through to committee.
Okay, thank you. Final question from me is, obviously AWAB's now taking a lot more work than previously on this. Are we measuring, and are we comfortable that there hasn't been an adverse effect on other repairs, because resources have been diverted away from standard, inverted commas, repairs towards AWAB's law? Or have you, and do you need more resources to overcome that?
We haven't seen a significant impact yet on other work and other repairs.
So that's encouraging, but you're monitoring it.
Yeah, I think that's when we start to mobilise the new repairs contract. I think looking at some of those key risks, sharing those with the contractors will be really important. Same with making sure that they are appropriately resourced in direct labour and supply chain. Internally, we are looking at, as part of strengthening, we have additional surveying capacity we're recruiting. There'll be more resource as part of the broader strengthening of the assets function, which are, again, like I said, we've got repairs manager coming out for recruitment imminently, if not today. I think the advert goes out, and along with other roles we're working through to bring through to approval. So we recognise that we do need more resource. We've identified what it is. We're going through the process of approval for them, but obviously it can never come soon enough.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other comments on this? Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, just as a follow-up to that, really, we're aware that this work is going to expand exponentially, really, when we bring in the new standards for AWAB's law. Firstly, what learning have we got from introducing this for the damp and mould? And are we prepared capacity-wise for the extra work that's going to be involved next year, just next year?
I think some of our initial learning has been around that initial assessment and the speed of getting maybe mould washes done. So we had some learnings around that. We had some learnings about making sure that we completed the reports properly, and that all parts of the report were completed properly. Just to pick up on what Christian was saying, we had 3 maintenance surveyors. We now have 5, so we've actually got 2 additional maintenance surveyors that are now in position permanently. We're just starting the process of recruiting 2 maintenance assistants, so contact for the contact centre, because obviously it does put pressure on all the triaging that you're doing, and it was trials and tribulations, and it was, you know, difficult at times, you know, when a lot of damp and mould calls were coming in to keep up with that triage. But we're going to, you know, that resource is, you know, going to have 2 additional maintenance assistants, you know, to help with that process, and we'll need those in place because when the other aspects of AWAB's law come in, we're going to have to start triaging those cases, you know, trips and falls hazards, you know, the excess cold hazards. So there's going to be more triaging to do there. But as I said, you know, we got that on board, as I said. Also, we are in a position we've not been in since I've been here, you know, over a year now, but we've now got a full quota of surveyors in the plant maintenance team. That gives us additional capacity to pick up damp and mould cases, peaks in damp and mould cases. So, yeah.
Mr. Knight, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just the repairs manager's job is online now and open. So if you know anybody, please put them in our direction. We've also got income management officer for housing and also disrepair surveyor as well. So this is a number of roles over the next 12 months. So
if anybody who's watching wishes to apply,
this is an advert now. Thank you.
Mr. Melgard.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about some additional officer groups created for complaints group. We've got performance group, a systems group in place, a resident feedback group. We have an internal compliance and safety group, which I chair. As part of that, we've agreed we'll be setting up some safety groups that report into that. One will be for AWAB's law, so we'll have fire safety, AWAB's law, compliance, work on our high-risk buildings, so that we've got stronger visibility on the work that happens at that officer level. So I think just, again, for me, having assurance, and then through the reporting chain, Phil has assurance that his teams are working what they need to do. The officers are working across teams, because I think other part of learning, certainly when it comes to some of the policies and procedures, the teams have to work together. For example, decanting. We've had different approaches within housing and within assets, and the D teams might be following their policy to the letter, but don't agree, because we've now got AWAB's law, which overrides a lot of what has gone before. So as part of the work we're doing with policies and procedures, will be, for example, with the decant policies, making sure that right where we've got AWAB's law taking on, that's really clear. And we're also looking at, in terms of what we have within the AWAB's law policy, making sure we've got everything that needs to be covered, appropriately covered with that policy and others. And again, making sure the teams are working collaboratively and not working cross purposes.
Okay, members, I'm going to move on. I think this is an important topic. We've spent a fair amount of time on this. Thank you for your questions on it. Again, this report is only to note, so there's no vote needed on it. And I'm then going to move on to item 10, voids and lettable standards update. Is it Mr. Linton or Mr. Melgard is going to take this?
I'm happy to pick this up initially, and then I'll bring in Dominic to provide a bit more context around performance. I know this is a topic which we brought back. I know it is important for us. We want to make sure that we are reducing the number of empty homes. We want to make sure that we're letting them more quickly, and that they are to the required standard that we have set. I think it has been a slow process, being very honest about the improvement that we are seeing. Although I think to emphasise the positives, certainly from when I sort of come in, we talked beginning of the year about the need to focus on voids. We are reducing each month the number of empty homes that we have, albeit slowly. So the numbers are coming down. There was more than 200 on our list when I started. That's sort of reducing. I think we're down to sort of 180, 190 when we take into account some of the empty homes we're keeping pending demolition or long-term review. We have seen from the performance improvements with the elements that we are directly responsible for with the lettings team, going through getting the properties let application process. So we are seeing improvements in the relet time there. I have said that that end-to-end time will probably not see the big improvement until we get the overall numbers of long-term voids down. We've got much smarter, sharper reporting. I see 2 reports on a Monday. We can see exactly which numbers of properties are overdue by X number of months. Certainly going back to when I started in January, we had, I think it was 39 properties which were more than 3 months. We start to see those reduced. There were 30 in May. So the numbers are coming down, just not as quickly as we want to see. We do know that a key part of this is the contractor performance. Again, we have more than one contractor responsible for the contractor phase, the works that need to be carried out. We are working with them, and I know in Phil's team, making sure that they're on top of what has been commissioned to them. We know that there have been challenges around taking time, challenges with some of the compliance, making everything joined up. We are focusing on that as part of the interim contract that we have in place. We have a new repairs contract that will be commencing towards the end of the year. Key part of that will be voids and void management. We're recruiting additional resources. I said repairs manager. We'll be recruiting a voids officer to help to take ownership of voids in the contractor phase, so that we'll have that daily tracking of everything that coming through. We're about to undertake an internal audit of the voids management process. So internal audit will be looking at that whole process. I know Phil's worked with them to make sure that that's everything that we need to have is in scope, so that we can come out with a clear set of, right, these are the findings, these are recommendations, what do you need to do around your own systems, processes, what you can be doing better with the contractors. So I think we do have an improvement, albeit marginal in some areas. We recognise that the biggest improvements have been with the areas directly in our control, less so with the areas that we commission our contractors to provide. We are working with them. We've got plans for the interim contract and the new repairs contract to have a better system and resources around delivering that. We're bringing in more resources to manage the process internally, new staff that we've talked about. We have an internal audit that we're undertaking, which will come out with a plan for us. And we've also got a major work stream in the service area plan, recruiting a couple of project managers. Again, I think we've got interviews coming up, if not already taken place. Paul can say that will be leading on that project. So providing not just within what we have within repairs, but looking at the whole process to take that internal audit, lead on it and deliver it. So I'll hand back to any questions.
Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, when a contractor delay without completing a job, do we have a penalty clause on it where they have to pay?
If under the current arrangement, no. No, under the interim arrangement contract that we have. So the previous arrangement, that wasn't the case, but we have under the interim contract, and we will under the new contract have what I would say would be a pain and gain. So we will be able to deduct if they delay. If they delay and it's their delay and it's not contributed to by anything that we've carried out or another contractor that we're appointing has carried out, we will be able to deduct deduct rent loss from them. If they finish the void early, then you know they can actually get a bonus. Then they'll actually be paid. I have to say I don't think I've ever actually experienced that. But as I said, you know, we have got that now written in. In fact, we were talking about it at the contract meeting on Friday. We were talking about that. We've got to play our part in that by getting the works priorities correct as well. So we've got to work with the contractor. Sometimes I've been finding out, that we've been putting jobs out on 10-day voids that need kitchens, replastering. So, sometimes you can do it within 10 days if you don't have any other problems. But, any property that generally needs a new bathroom and a new kitchen and other void works, it's a real challenge to do it. So I think we're trying to be a little bit more realistic about the timescales that we're giving. But then by doing that, then that should help actually give us good performance, because if we're more realistic about the time we're giving, then that gives them a chance to actually deliver in that performance.
That is good, but it's just disappointed that we didn't have that in place, the penalised, because we lose a lot of money by that. But that is good now, we're bringing in that. But the next thing about if they finish on time, to give them a little bonus, I don't think we should.
I think that was in finishing them early. Not on time.
Finish early. We shouldn't give them nothing.
Yeah, if they finished a week early, which allows us to rent the property a week earlier, then we gain from that week's rent. So so that's an incentive. But they'd have to finish a whole week earlier. And similarly, if they're delayed, And I think I think you've used the term. We've got to be careful about how we word it, because it's not a penalty; it's actually a loss. We have to treat it as a loss under the law contract. Then it's actually a loss. And to be technical, in building contracts, it's called liquidated and ascertained damages. So, but it has to be a genuine pre-estimate of loss. And what we've also done is we've set it out within the contract, within our rent structure. So if it's a big 4-bed house and they're delayed on the big 4-bed house, then we will get the full recovery of the rent for that 4-bed house, rather than just an average cost. So,
Councillor Barton.
I just think that's a minefield. And from a contractor's point of view, that job's going to take 20 days. Okay, I've done it in 10, I want a week. I just think that's an absolute minefield. This is where contractor and employer comes in, contract manager. This is the face-to-face talking. This is not necessarily, I'm not a fan of KPIs. It's a case of talking to the contractor. What do you reckon? I'm always honest. If it's 2 weeks, it's going to be 2 weeks. It's going to encourage a contractor to add on a few days to say, oh, look, I finished early. And then you end up finishing early on every job. It's a good little earner. I'm not in for that. I'm just not in for that, favour that at all. It's just going to be a nightmare to run, and it's down to the contract manager talking to the contractor. The contract manager, if he's knowledgeable, should know kitchen, bathroom, allow for this, allow for that, 3 weeks. Let's say 3 weeks. Sort of thing. If you go to 6 weeks, then you've got a problem with the contract manager not managing the contract properly. So the contractor then got to come up with the excuses as to why. And sometimes there are supply problems. You know, it wasn't long ago you couldn't get hold of plaster, thanks to COVID and whatever. I'll shut up now.
I have a suspicion that this is already in the new draft of the contract with the new supplier. And I think it's one thing, I think Councillor Barton makes a really valid point here. That's something we probably need to monitor, is how often we pay a bonus. I think it was the bonus, the word used, whether it's the right term or not. But Councillor Melrose?
I think the word we're looking for is trends. So I think like when you say the contract management, if trends, Trends, sorry if I mispronounced it. Because like you said, if someone's always overestimating and like constantly, you're like, this one, you know, red circle, underline. But I think, okay, there's about finishing, but also the quality. I think we need to talk about, because they could finish a week early, but it could be a cowboy job. So I think there's that element as well we'd have to consider. And I think we just have to make sure we're not creating a whole industry when it comes to this as well. So I think we've got to find that compromise and balance, because we do appreciate
fair
things
point.
can happen.
Mr. Melgar?
Yeah, I think the whole focus of bringing in going through the whole tendering process with all the work that's involved, officers, consultants scoping out, involving residents to get the best quality service for the best value for money that gives us surety of our spend, quality and affordability over the next, how many years, 15 years potentially. I think there is a really important piece to be able to explain what, certainly for the interim contract arrangements we've got in place, and what is coming through in the new contract. Helpfully, Mr. Dark is doing a session with councillors on Thursday evening around assets, repairs, maintenance, AWAB's law. At which, if there are any questions relating to that, I'm happy to take them away. But I think when we do get into mobilisation, a part of getting across, because some of this should be invisible at this level. It should be what are we delivering in terms of outputs? How are we making sure we're holding the contractors to account properly as a good client? What outcomes are we delivering for our tenants and residents? But I think as part of that, we need to be explaining to committee and members what's going to be different, why is it going to be different, how are we monitoring performance, how are we engaging residents with that. And I know as part of the mobilisation plan and comms plan for tenants, residents and for members, we'll make sure we get that across. So
when should we bring that back to committee? When would that be the appropriate times? That I think is something we should add into the work programme.
I think we have, obviously kicking into contract award imminently. It might be August.
So I think we'll look at September as the earliest date, probably then. Give you a bit of grace, as these things never always go straight. Now, Councillor, are you still going? Yes.
As a contractor, obviously, as opposed to the contracts manager. The contract we have, we know when we go and do it, what we call an enhanced test, right, which is electric and everything else. We have to turn that test around within 48 hours. And then what we have is the client. The client then takes 2, 3 or 4 weeks, or sometimes 6 months to order that work. We want them to turn that report around, but we've got to do our bit. We've got to turn, I'm still looking at you, Phil, I should be looking at everybody else as well. We've got to turn our bit around as quick as well. Because we can work on a 2 week. So we'll go and do a job. We turn our report around in 48 hours. If the client then authorises it, we have a lead-in of around 1 to 2 weeks. Because if we didn't, I'd have 10 blokes sitting on their backside. So we have to authorise the work in a timely fashion as well. So if we're not doing that, we're letting the contractor down.
Are we going to have a session about all the new KPIs, etc., I think, in the same session, and how we're monitoring that? I think your point's valid, and that should be where that was picked up. Okay. Now, Councillor Harrington, did I see you earlier on? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I've got a couple of questions on the reports, but on the point about looking at new contracts for this year, the point about the bonus, I'm kind of thinking that it depends how the contract, how they're reimbursed for that piece of work. It's in their interest to do a quality job and do it within time. And then it's in their interest if they're getting paid for that work. Obviously they want to do the best and the quickest they can, and therefore introducing extra bonuses to me is complicating a bit. My question on the report is looking at 2.5, which I didn't, it is 2.5 on page 2. I was just reading about the numbers of typical number of standard voids that we have, including those that are major voids where significant work is required. Both of these are showing positive trends. And then the last sentence, I couldn't quite understand the last sentence, which says, however, it must be noted that the letting of the properties that have been long-term void will adversely affect re-let times once they are let. And I couldn't quite understand what that was saying. And my follow-up question on the same area.
I think it's missing the word average. Yes, I think that's what's referring to. Average re-let time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Which is
spotted
kind
that earlier on when I went through it. That
Right, yeah, you picked that up. Yeah, good. Because that's what I was thinking, is it just a statement of the obvious there? And so, yeah, that's probably helps explain it. And also, I noticed that the target agreed for 26, 27 is 45 days, but in the table above, which is based on Housemarque's median performance, are we looking? Am I comparing like for like here? Because
No,
in table 2.1, it talks about 89, 90.
2.1 is what you're looking at to compare the 90 to the 45, I think I'm right in saying.
Yes, it seemed a heck
But
of an increase
2.3 is a subset of the 90 and the 45.
Right, I'm not sure if I fully understand. If I try and make my question as simple as possible, we had a target of 80 days for 25-26, and then it reduces to 45 for 26-27. Is that correct? Because that seems a heck of an increase. Decrease even, yes. Increase in terms of performance.
Yeah, I mean, the 45 days is the target that we want to get to this year. I think like I said, as we bring some of the older properties back into use, some of them have been void for quite some time. That will affect the average time. Our ambition as part of the service area plan was to get each quarter sort of improving where we are, that we can get ourselves, by the time we get to the end of the year, got all of any void that comes up, we will be meeting end-to-end on average the equivalent Housemarque benchmark for our peer group. So if we're in the middle, if 45 days is the middle, and we need to make sure that we've got the right, that's why we've done work on categorisation, because normally they'll exclude major voids, so you need to do, basically knock it down and rebuild it. You're not going to have that as a regular void, it will be a separate category. So, but that was a target we wanted to set to contractors internally, and that's where we want to be, and we will get there. But obviously, it is incremental improvement on the way.
I think it would be helpful to put in context. When we first saw that, I think in September or October, this is, I think, the only situation we rated red at the time. And I have a feeling you were running it over 100 days at that point, well over 100 days. So we are seeing progress. I still wouldn't think it's green. It's got to amber now, which is progress, but there's still a lot of work to do. And I think the officers are well aware of that, and certainly Councillor Melrose is as well. The report is showing an interim step of progress, but there's further to go. And 45, that's the national standard, I believe. You're saying it's Housemarque, so a run rate of that. Did I see somebody else? Yes, Councillor Barton.
Yeah, on that, do we take out properties that we know have got severe problems so as they don't affect the average letting? Is that just straightforward, yes or no? That'll do. And when, Christian, you're talking about we want to see a drop, we want to see a sustained drop, not a big drop up and down on the 40-odd days and that. We just want to... we've talked about the contractor incentive scheme. Let's just talk about the tenant incentive scheme now. We say here we're doing... I don't want to use that word beginning with B. So, a cash incentive for people to vacate 4-bedroom properties, to downsizing to say 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom property. We're probably talking about older persons who have grown up, had a family, had 4 bedrooms, and now all the kids have left and they're coming on to that later age. Have we got the properties available for those people to move in, like 2-bedroom bungalows and things? You might find that a couple are now living in a 4-bedroom property but living in downstairs, converted the dining room into a bedroom and this, that and the other. Have we got the properties to ask those incentivise?
Can I suggest, Councillor Barton, because when I was portfolio holder, and I know when Councillor Matesky was portfolio holder, and now Councillor Melrose, the whole allocation is a science. it's probably, no, it's more an art at times, isn't it? It's a real science. And I think rather than go into that issue, which is a very, very valid issue about how are we allocating properties, how do we incentivise people, if the committee wants to take a look at that, I think Councillor Morales and I will have to put our heads together about when you think you could come back to us about allocation policy, rather than try and do a half-baked discussion on allocation policy this evening. I'm now looking at Councillor Melrose and Mr Melgard, so I've just thrown them a curveball.
No. Allocation policy, as I agree with you, is an art, I would call it. It is something we are looking at, especially with LGR, looking at our neighbours, because we are an outlier in some areas. And obviously with the time we've got towards unitary, what can we change or what can't we? So we are sort of to look at it. So I believe that we do need, as a council, probably a discussion in the next few months anyway around allocations, which I'm sure everyone will have an opinion on.
I'm sure they will, they did previously, so I think it's to note that we need to add allocations as into a future meeting, but not to put the date of the meeting in there yet, so that we don't lose track of it. And I've no doubt that we'll be talking about it at some extent. So apologies for members. I'm going to move us on at 5 to 8. We're still not going to make a meeting by 8 o'clock. I'm going to move us on again on item 10. It was to note, so that's fine. And then we're going to move to item 11, the gap analysis to the requirements for the regulator. Mr Melgard, I think this is your project, as it were.
Thank you, Chair. It seemed quite appropriate to bring this along alongside the end of term report. I won't go through the report as it's quite lengthy, but I thought it was an opportunity of, I suppose, setting out a reminder of the requirements of the regulator and the regulations, and setting out clearly what the regulator, as part of comes to inspection or part of compliance with the standards, will expect elected members, the governing body, cabinet, housing scrutiny committee, audit and standards, overview and scrutiny to see, either as a sort of one-off or on a regular basis, so that you can be assured that they have strong oversight and assurance about how the services are being managed, how they're being delivered, where the risks are, etc. I think I've set out separately, as part of that report, the progress has been made. I think it is important to note the large amount of information that's coming through, that's, again, more targeted, more relevant, more focused, and giving more time for the proper discussion and scrutiny at these meetings and others. The report also goes into a bit more detail about what the priorities are for this year and beyond. I think, again, in the appendix that accompanies that, sets out what we currently do, what I have been doing, but also other areas where, as we've come across other examples where other things that the committee needs to be seeing at some point. It doesn't have to be a report every meeting, but as an example each year, so that you're assured that and understand where we are with antisocial behaviour, where we are with understanding our tenants, understanding our stock, and you'll see from some of the papers here, for example, getting assurance about how we collect tenant data, tenant information and satisfaction information, so that you can be assured that we can rely on that to set our plans. So in a way, it's a little bit of a discussion, but I'm hoping to, again, reinforce the committee where we are, what we're doing. We're doing a lot of things really, really well in terms of meeting the standards and providing evidence. There are gaps. Committee's not been running for that long. There is still annual report, and I've identified some of the examples in the appendix that I think, as good practice, members should be seeing. It's then a case of having that discussion, what needs to be included and when, and then making sure there's sufficient time within these committees and the right timing to be able to receive and review those reports. So it's very much for open up to questions.
Members. Councillor Bird.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting reading the main report. I mean, it is a big report, where it's actually spelling out that councillors and board members being you lot, councillor being us lot, have responsibilities to do on reporting stuff that's going on. So like the AWAB's law that we're talking about that. It's our responsibility as councillors, if we identify it, to flag it up. There's also a list of things we ought to be monitoring, and fortunately they're all the ones we are monitoring. So we're on board with that. But it's just interesting, I think, for members to look at what the regulator is expecting the responsibility for us to take on. And I think that's important because we can't ignore it.
Mr. Knight.
Yeah, just to add to the conversation. We know we're going to be inspected. We are due inspection. So that'll either be later this year or early next year, where the regulator will come in and give us a judgment based on our compliance to the standards. With Councillor Harrison joining the committee, he will have the honour of having HQN compliance training. So that one will be in your diary in the next few weeks, Councillor Harrison. But it'll be there for those councillors on the committee who'd like refresher training. It will be open to you all to attend if you'd like a refresher as well on the consumer standards for social housing. Okay, because obviously the regulator will be looking for, as you've said, Councillor Bode, members' understanding of performance and compliance, not just within the officer team, but also within the political membership and scrutiny of the council as well. Thank you.
Councillor Morris.
Just to add on that, me and Darren Knight met Enfield Council, that is a C1 rating council for housing stock, and we did ask around when the inspection happens, what is the expectations for the housing scrutiny? What would be the expectation for me, for Councillor Phillips? And they sort of explained of the interview process they would be going through. And obviously that's feeding into, okay, because what I wouldn't want is to put anyone in a situation where we're setting them up to fail. So I know we're planning a mock inspection first, so we're all going to have a bit of role playing to do, and I can promise you it's only one of you probably who's going to be interviewed. You can all fight amongst yourselves whose it's going to be.
Okay. Mr. Leach, you have something you want to...
Yes, through you, Chair. I was just sitting here thinking about the training aspect, and obviously it's good to have all members of the committee trained, but of course there are also named substitutes as well. So therefore, I was wondering if you as chair wanted to write to the group leaders, once we've got the date, to encourage as many substitutes to make sure they've attended as well as part of that process.
I think that's an excellent idea that we have the substitutes trained as well. I think everybody here other than Councillor Harrison's had the training.
Sorry, Chair.
You're one of the original ones.
I was going to ask, I don't know whether I did it.
I beg your pardon?
I don't know whether I did it. Have we got a list?
Back in 23, early 24.
Oh, right. Can't remember. We'll have a refresher then.
Maybe then, I think this is a point where I would encourage everybody to attend a refresher, and as suggested by Mr. Leach, I will initially write to group leaders, but then I'll probably write to all councillors. Mr. Knight.
Yeah, I think if there's, because obviously if you did the original training, it was quite obviously new at the time. You've obviously, most of you have crunched through quite a few papers over the last sort of 18 months. So if there's any specific areas you'd like more training or explanation on, then Damien from HQN can perhaps tailor it slightly. Obviously making sure that we cover off the new councillors in terms of the wider understanding of the regulatory framework, but if there are areas of specific areas you wanted more training on to support your work in this committee, then let us know, and Damien can make it more tailored. But it'll be the usual sort of format, 6 o'clock online, about an hour and a half. But I think it'd be great to have as many of the committee there again, because obviously it may prompt more questions from you all as you move forward. Thank you.
We don't have a date yet, Mr. Leach. Well, we sorted that one, so we'll sort out the date. Any other questions on item 11? Any other points? I think it's a very useful report, this one. It's one I would suggest that we keep fairly close to, we don't lose it. we keep it in mind as we move through the municipal year. I'm going to move on then to item 12, which is our end of term report. I'm sure you all remember these from school. We have to mark, but as a committee, we have to mark our own homework to a certain extent. I don't know if it's me or Mr. Leach. Probably Mr. Leach. I think you should be leading off on this if there's any questions, etc.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief introduction. As a Scrutiny Committee, you're required to do an annual report to Council each year, setting out the work you've undertaken. There's no real prescribed format of that. I have changed the format slightly for this year for both Housing Scrutiny and Overview and Scrutiny Committee to give a bit, there's an introduction by the Chair, then a bit of context about the number of meetings and the work undertaken, as well as add just a simple list of the report items you considered as well.
Members, I don't know if you're as bowled over as bold, nor surprised just at how much we have covered in the last 12 months. This next 12 months is going to be as busy. Councillor Barton.
I would just like to say thank you for your due diligence, Chair, over the last 12 months.
Thank you, pleasure. Any other comment? I'll take any other praise, but I think it's more. But I will. I think let's move the meeting on rather than just. Before we move on to the next item, I omitted on the very first item 6 on the work committee to recommend, and I'm sorry to take you right back to the beginning of the evening, that the resident engagement strategy is moved to August, so it comes along with the strategy update on the resident engagement communication. That makes sense to you. It just makes sense to have the two reports at the same time. Any comments, any objections? Words in favour? Thank you very much. Right. So this now concludes the public part, but proposed to. I haven't.
You need to vote on the end of term report.
Oh, right. Thank you. I hadn't realised that. Apologies, members. So the recommendations, the committee recommends to council that it notes the end of term report for this committee for the municipal year 25-26 as detailed in Appendix A to the report. I will propose that from the chair. Councillor Barton is seconding. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. We have now reached the end of the public meeting. As per the agenda, item 13, I propose to exclude the public and press for the reasons set out on the agenda. I want to thank those of you who've been watching YouTube, and we will now go into confidential second session. If I have a seconder, Councillor Barton, can I see all those in favour, please? That, again, is unanimous. Thank you very much for attending.